Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anton Muscatelli. I'm Principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of Glasgow, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all to the University and the Bute Hall for this John Smith lecture on public service. It's great to see so many of you here tonight, and I'm sure that Catherine Smith, who is Chair of the John Smith Centre and indeed daughter of John Smith, and all those involved in the Centre must be really pleased and hugely encouraged to see such a positive response this evening. You're all very welcome. But let me say at the outset just how honoured the University of Glasgow is to be working in partnership with the Smith family and to be the home for the John Smith Centre at the University of Glasgow in the College of Social Sciences. The university's relationship with the Smith family began when John and Elizabeth Smith first met while studying at the university. Both their daughters, Sarah and of course Catherine, also came here, so we have a strong association with the family. But what's extra special is the fact that this association runs beyond the personal to the ideals and intentions behind the formation of the Centre back in March 2016. And these intentions were encapsulated in John Smith himself. He was one of our most distinguished alumni. A bust of his image has pride of place in the Glasgow University Union, where he cut his political teeth, debating and discussing some of the most vital issues of the day. His influence and impact were, and absolutely are, profound. He encapsulated a lifetime of commitment to public service, and it is this that guides and informs the work of the Centre. At the heart of our partnership with the Centre is our shared aim to continue to attract more people into public service roles and to contribute to public life. The Centre has the laudable, in these cynical times might seem a very daunting aim, to promote a positive vision for representative politics. So often, and perhaps more than ever, politics and politicians are not held by the public in high esteem. And yet, as the Centre rightly reminds us, we and the generations coming behind us have to re-engage and be inspired once again to see politics as the most effective way to pursue change in a democratic society. It's sad and alarming to see just how cheaply the rights and privileges that we enjoy as a democracy are treated. There's a dangerous complacent indifference around which, if we're not vigilant, will slowly but surely erode those rights and privileges till in time, almost imperceptibly, they'll be gone. I'm sure no one in this hall would want this to happen under our watch. And so there's an important and essential role, not just for the Centre, but for us all to reassert the value of public service, to restore our faith in politics, and so encourage people to think about the contribution that they could make to public and political life. The Centre, through its work, aims to reignite society's trust in politicians, to restore the ideal of public service as a noble vocation, and to re-establish public confidence in this, the most vital part of our society. And events such as the Centre's conference today, which culminates in this evening's lecture, are all part of the Centre's activities to change attitudes and perceptions positively and to encourage participation in political life and service. I know the Centre also sees the immense value of having politicians who stand as role models, not just what can be done and achieved in this way, the manner in which it's done and achieved, involved with the Centre. And I'm delighted to say that in our distinguished speaker tonight, these aims, these outreach and role models all come together and into one. And therefore, it's my very great pleasure to introduce your speaker to you now, Sir John Major. Sir John, of course, entered the British Parliament in 1979. He entered UK government in 1983. He joined the Cabinet as Chief Secretary to Treasury in 1987 and was appointed Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs in July 1989. He then became Chancellor of the Exchequer in October 1989. Sir John was then, of course, appointed Prime Minister on November 28, 1990, and he served in that position until May 1997. In the general election of April 1992, he led the Conservative Party to an unprecedented fourth term in office. As Prime Minister, Sir John focused his efforts upon securing peace in Northern Ireland and upholding Britain's position in the world community as a political, social and economic leader. He instigated long-term reforms in education, health and public services. On May 1, 1997, he handed over the strongest economy any incoming UK government had inherited. Sir John retired from the House of Commons at the UK general election in 2001. Away from politics, his business interests include senior advisor to Credit Suisse and chairman of the advisory board of Global Infrastructure Management. Sir John chairs the campaign board of King's London and is a joint president of Chatham House. In October 2011, Sir John was appointed chairman of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust, a Commonwealth-wide initiative which has been established to create a lasting legacy to Her Majesty's 60 years as sovereign. On New Year's Day 1999, the Queen appointed Sir John a Companion of Honour in recognition of his initiation of the Northern Ireland peace process, and on St George's Day 2005, he was made a Knight Companion of the Most Noble Order of the Garter. In 2012, he was awarded the Grand Cordon of the Rising Sun by the Emperor of Japan. So, John, it really is a great pleasure to welcome you to the University of Glasgow. Can I thank you on behalf of the John Smith Centre and everyone here this evening for agreeing to deliver the John Smith Lecture on Public Service. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and we're all looking forward to your lecture now. Thank you.
Well, Anton, thank you, and good evening, everyone. It's a delight to see you here. It would have been rather a dull evening without you. It seemed to me to be a good idea to accept this evening's invitation. When Elizabeth Smith invited me, I was delighted to accept, and for a number of reasons. It seemed to me to be in the very best interests of the Scottish Enlightenment that the John Smith Centre, whose mission is to restore faith in public service, should be housed in one of Europe's most ancient and venerable universities. And so it is for me this evening truly a very great privilege to be here. But I'm here too because of John Smith. John was a rare talent, a formidable debater, the sort of tenacious politician that our country could ill afford to lose. If the fates had allowed, I believe he would have been a Prime Minister of distinction. Now, some people might think that it's odd that I'm speaking at an event that implicitly honours the legacy of a political opponent. But that's silly. I'm proud to be here to do so. Democracy and concern for our national well-being isn't a preserve of any one party or any one philosophy. It's our common heritage fought for by our predecessors. And today it's the safety valve through which we debate differing views. But debate does not mean that we must disagree on everything, because we don't and we shouldn't. Politics isn't warfare. It's about deciding what is in the best interests of the four nations of our United Kingdom. And the idea that politicians should only talk to their own tribe, speaking only for or to those who agree with them, explains much that has gone wrong with modern politics. It's a bunker attitude that has to change. The public don't like it, and the public are right not to like it. Now, John and I were political opponents, but never, I think, personal opponents. I admired his ability and conviction, even when I disagreed with him. At Prime Minister's questions, adrenaline propelled both of us to remarks that perhaps in retrospect were best not made. But when the ritual was over, we withdrew occasionally to my room to enjoy a drink, and it was never tea. Our conversations ranged far beyond politics. Although we did muse, I'd better tell you in the privacy of this meeting, we did muse upon whether we could swap troublesome members. A Skinner for a redwood was one proposition I recall. Now that, of course, was a joke born of the frustrations of party management. One truth about mainstream politicians is that they have more in common with each other than you may realise. Yet they hide agreement from public view, as if consensus were a betrayal of party philosophy, when to most people it simply seems to be common sense. I am a Conservative. John was committed to the Labour Party all his life. As a Conservative, I prefer pragmatism to ideology, negotiation to confrontation, consensus to conflict, and public service to self-service. With which of those choices would John Smith have disagreed? Not one, I think. Now, ahead of our country at the moment lies some crucial decisions for each of the 4 countries of our United Kingdom and for our political system. So this evening I want to concentrate on politics and public service and the vital role of the civil service in delivering policy. But first, and predominantly this evening, politics. At the moment, our kingdom is not contented. Our 4 nations are not in harmony. Respect for politics is at a very low level. Politicians may be praised individually, but collectively the public appears to have lost trust in them. And this is an unhappy state of affairs, helpful only to those who wish us harm or to undermine our pragmatic system of government. Yet it has many causes. A decade of uncertainty in which too many people are worse off today than they were in 2007. The 24-hour news cycle that exposes politics to more intensive and extensive and immediate scrutiny than politicians have ever faced before. And there is the widespread use of social media that enables a lie to gain traction before the truth is even sought. The rise of populism, fake news, and unscrupulous leaders on the fringes of democratic politics have added to the disrespect. And also the referendum on the European Union, during which, to our national shame, truth was a casualty. Facts were dismissed as project fear. Fiction was treated as fact. Assertion was presented as if it were cast iron truth. And as a result, the public were left baffled and bemused, lost between truth and falsehood. We now know there will be no extra $350 million a week for the National Health Service. In fact, to the reverse. Estimates of the loss due to Brexit have already risen up to £800 million a week, or £40 billion a year. The taxpayer will also be paying $39 billion to divorce ourselves from the European Union, and unknown further amounts to pay for whole departments of staff to manage Brexit and compensate special interest groups for lost European revenue. And I strongly suspect literally billions more to protect our economy from the lost opportunities of the European market. And of course, in addition to that, the private sector is already spending huge sums to relocate people, offices and technology away from the United Kingdom to the continent of Europe. That was always the likely outcome of Brexit. But it was not believed. It was not believed because the Leave campaign convinced the public that experts and the elite were conspiring together to create Project Fear. Sadly, as each successive day passes, it is becoming ever more apparent that the experts were speaking only the truth. This tactic of destroying faith in expertise has helped create an even greater distrust in public life. Once a trust is broken, it is difficult to resurrect, and politics will be the loser for a very long time to come. And in the midst of this, a fundamental truth has been lost. And the fundamental truth is this. It's that the vast majority of our politicians, not all of them, but the vast majority of our politicians are diligent public representatives who fight and vote for what their conscience believes and their philosophy dictates. It is precisely these people that politics needs, not the chancers and rogues who stray into politics believing House of Cards is political reality and that the truth is nothing more than a plaything. A second casualty of the referendum was Britain's reputation for civilised debate and rational action. That has gone. Political conduct during the referendum wrecked our reputation for civilised debate. And there was nothing rational about triggering Article 50 before knowing what it was we wished to negotiate or what it was we were prepared to concede in order to obtain it. The referendum also divided opinion within and between the political parties, and it coarsened political debate. It unleashed a poison into our political system that has caused wounds to open up and flow. These will not heal easily, even if, miraculously, a consensus deal emerges. Opponents of Brexit were condemned as traitors or saboteurs or wreckers. Judges were the enemies of the people. There is no truth, no fairness, no logic in these charges. They were merely intended to abuse individuals who oppose Brexit and to discourage others from doing the same. Foreigners have been made to feel so unwelcome that many of them have already chosen to return home. The hostility directed to them will not be forgotten and may grow into a distaste for our country that one day may rebound upon us. The referendum was peppered day after day with anti-immigration stories. At its conclusion, hostility to migrants had increased and was made to seem acceptable. It is no coincidence that hate crimes have grown in number. The voice of Britain that immigrants heard, which resonated around the whole world, was not that of the moderate majority. To me, who grew up alongside migrants in Brixton, it sounded more like the voice of bigotry. None of it reflected the tolerance for which our country has long been admired. It was not the voice of the Britain I know and cherish. Now, this tone of debate isn't unique to our own United Kingdom. Across Europe, the far right has been flourishing against a backcloth of low growth, high unemployment, and static or falling wages. The establishment, everywhere, is seen to have failed, and fresh new voices, crammed with negatives, anti-foreigner, anti-immigrant, anti-Europe, anti-elite, anti-everything, are winning support with policy promises that can never be delivered. In our own country, mainstream politicians are having to fight hard for a hearing. And whether they are Conservative or Labour or Liberal Democrat or any other party in our United Kingdom, it is vital that they are given that hearing. As we face an uncertain future, our voters would be wise to aim for a new age of reason and elect politicians able to rebut the extreme views of those who howl at the moon while promising the earth. Our politics needs advocates, leading by explanation and example, not by stigmatizing others, not by soundbite, and never by deceit. At the moment, there is much talk of a new party in politics. You will all be familiar with the famous line of Yeats, "Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold." Well, in our ancient democracy, the centre of our politics has held and been an example to the wider world. Our duty is to ensure that it continues to do so and to be an example to the wider world. In this era of fake news and populism, that is a momentous challenge for us. When I refer to the centre, I don't mean some amorphous new party of moderates and centrists. Even if such a party were formed and were elected, what would unfold when it fell out of favour, as it would one day? All governments are mortal. And then, with mainstream opinion sidelined, the country's only choice would be between the extremes of left or right. That would be an awful outcome. Our electorate needs a choice between parties that are demonstrably rational, realistic, and sane. So when I speak of the centre, I mean that our main national parties, especially Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat across the whole of the United Kingdom, must each retain a mainstream majority within their own ranks. I hesitate now before saying what I believe must be said. Currently, both the Conservative and the Labour parties are being manipulated by fringe opinion. The rationale for extremists joining mainstream parties is entirely logical. From within them, they can influence policy. From without, they very rarely can. At the moment, there are people who, for now, may have their boots within the Conservative or Labour parties, but not their minds, and certainly not their hearts. The Conservative Party membership appears to be hollowing out traditional Conservatives, while former members of UKIP strengthen the anti-European right of the Conservative Party. In Parliament, the European Research Group has become a party within a party, with its own whips, its own funding, and its own priorities. Some of its more extreme members seem to me to have little or no affinity to moderate, pragmatic, and tolerant conservatism. The ERG, the European Research Group, does not represent a majority view, but with a minority government, as now, can determine policy simply by being intransigent, which is precisely what it is doing. Some, who I think may fairly be called zealots, seem incapable of looking beyond the one issue of Europe. It's not just that it dominates their thinking, it seems to wholly obsess them. The Labour Party has a different dilemma, but with a similar outcome. It has enjoyed a vast growth of membership, cut-price membership, that has captured many constituency organisations, their national conference, important party positions, and has left control of policy at the mercy of a passionate, active, far-left base rather than the centre-left. Yesterday, 7 moderate members of Parliament left the Labour Party. I admire their courage and their conviction. It was a brave thing for them to do. But I hope they have not cut themselves adrift forever. Labour needs moderate members of Parliament, and the country needs a moderate Labour Party. Complacent voices dismiss the chances of fringe opinion gaining control of the political agenda. Britain is too pragmatic, they say, too stable. Our political system is too mature. I hope that they are right. But in the recent past, much that seemed impossible once has come to pass. The election of President Trump, the growth of the far right in Poland, in Hungary, in Austria, in Italy, in Germany, in France. Complacent voices expected none of that to happen, and nor did many predict Brexit. They regarded the UKIP party as a joke an outlet for frustration, and a harmless home for anti-immigration sentiment. It turned out to be far more than that. In the referendum, I voted to remain in the European Union. We lost. But I have not changed my mind that the fallout from Brexit will be long and painful. It will not come to an end on the 29th of March. The result divided our four nations. It will weaken our overseas influence, undermine our economic prospects, and impoverish those in our country who have least. Many people seem to be intensely relaxed about Brexit. I am not. I cannot rid myself of fears that we are about to move from a position of power and influence around the world to one of relative isolation and greater weakness. And also, as a Briton, I find it painful to come to terms with the possibility that within my lifetime I repeat, could, nothing is certain, I could see the breakup of the United Kingdom. I hope I'm wrong, but the agonies of Brexit have the capacity to do just that. Some argue that a breakup won't happen because economic logic is against it, but sentiment and emotion is a potent mix. Economic logic was against Brexit, yet look where we are now. I am not suggesting that it is predetermined that Scotland and Northern Ireland will leave the United Kingdom. It is not. But I am suggesting that leaving the European Union will make an independent Scotland and a united Ireland more likely than if we had remained within the European Union. Let me tell you why I believe that. 2015, Scotland voted to stay in the United Kingdom and, of course, in Europe. Yet English and Welsh votes are now taking Scotland out of Europe against their will. Scotland cannot apply to rejoin unless they gain independence. The incentive to try again is clear. As for Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin are already calling for a new border poll on a united Ireland. This call will become more compelling if there is a hard border, with all the attendant risks of a return to violence. I don't believe that a border poll would succeed in the near future. But within a few years, who can be sure? It is, to me, astonishing that English unionists are so avid to leave the European Union that they are willing to put at risk our far more historic union with Scotland and with Northern Ireland. As of this moment, the world's economy is dominated by the three great economic powers: America, China, and the European Union. As the UK leaves the European Union and the European economy stutters, that trio may shrink to a duo. That is not in our national interests, nor in that of our continental neighbours. I don't wish to see Europe, the cradle of democracy, as a subordinate power to President Xi's autocratic China or Mr. Trump's dysfunctional United States. I worry too about Britain's diplomacy. For generations, our diplomacy has been supercharged by our close alliance with America and with Europe. But we are now leaving Europe at exactly the moment the United States is moving away from us and towards the Pacific. Punching above our weight, as Douglas Hurd once put it, may no longer be so easy. It may be good old British grit to hail Britain for going it alone. But as Churchill noted, the only thing worse than fighting with allies is fighting without them. That applies just as much in peacetime as it does in war. The many challenges before us must be faced by our governments and by our public service. We take public service for granted. We have grown up with it. We are familiar with it. We expect it to be there. We shouldn't take it for granted. It is an enormous undertaking, embracing, as it does, Parliament, the armed forces, the Home and Foreign Service, local government, the judiciary, the emergency services, and so much else besides. We need them all to perform well if we are to protect the society in which we wish to live. But that raises a question. What sort of society do we wish to live in? I see no attraction in an overmighty state, whether it is benevolent or restrictive, and of course it could be either. Such a state takes decisions and choices away from individuals or families. Liberty of choice is too much part of our national DNA for us to be happy with such a situation. Nor do I favour a minimalist state, the so-called Singapore of the North option. This may work for Singapore, but surely would not for us. It is usually advocated by those with little or no understanding of how important public service is to the majority of our nation. Its virtues of low taxes, low regulation, and maximum liberty of personal choice are enticing, but the price to be paid for them is too high. A minimalist state may be fine for the successful, for the wealthy, for the self-confident, but it could equally prove a nightmare for the majority of our nation. It is not a route our welfare state should take. In a lecture like this, it is rather unenterprising to admire the status quo, but in one area I do. The second half of the 20th century gave us a mixed economy and a welfare state. That seems to me to fit comfortably with our British instinct for fairness, for tolerance, and for choice. We've enjoyed it for decades, and we should stick with it. We can all acknowledge the role of the public and private sectors, even as we dispute precisely where the boundaries of each of them should be. But the success of such a choice depends upon more than political willpower. The role of public service is crucial. Almost no one can be wholly independent of it. It matters to us all, and so does its efficiency. In our future world, which is hurtling towards us faster than almost anyone can comprehend, we will live in a world in which people will change jobs, indeed whole careers, faster than ever before, and in which whole industries will rise and fall. In that world, we need the civil service to protect and enhance the quality of all public service. The civil service once worked under a strict code that all mishaps, all errors, were the responsibility of their political masters. Of course, it was a fiction. But it was a fiction with a purpose. It recognized the separation of powers between politicians and civil servants. It protected civil servants who were unfamiliar with and unequipped for the savage cut and thrust of modern-day politics. For many years, it was an accepted and effective modus operandi, and I was saddened when ministers began to place public blame on those who served them. Even when it was justified, it was unwise and unfair. Civil servants act under ministerial direction, and whilst that remains the case, they deserve to be protected by those whom they serve. Civil servants are enablers. They work with ministers to turn policy into reality. In doing so, they are not merely handmaids to the mighty, but fully fledged partners. And their role is crucial. Departments of state have an historic memory that no minister can match. And often, of course, the civil servant can be more experienced, perhaps even more able than the minister. Discretion forbids my offering examples of this, current or past, preferably current. The work of civil servants can be fiendishly complex. Consider, for example, social security reform and the delivery of social benefits, or the work of ambassadors representing our countries, often in hostile environments, or the Treasury, where spending misjudgments can change the lives of millions of people. But that's also true of other parts of public service. It's true of our armed forces, who put their lives at risk for the common good, and our emergency services, who face the risk of injury or death on any day. The point is this: we need to recruit talent in every part of public service, and in return, we need to give public service the respect that it deserves. Government, who are elected public servants, need unelected public servants to make their administration effective, and they cannot do it without them. Too often, events leave governments, all governments, irrespective of party, struggling even to catch up with events. And yet, if we are to achieve our future national ambitions, governments must be ahead of the game, planning for what will happen, rather than being overwhelmed by what has happened or what is currently happening. And that needs efficiency across the whole rank of public service. Some people disparage public service as a well-paid, well-pensioned sinecure. It is far from that. Public servants are participants in the battle for a better future, and their role, although often unrecognised, is absolutely crucial. Let me summarise. Within a very few days, members of Parliament will make decisions that will determine all our futures. I believe we have a right to expect them to vote for an outcome that best protects the future welfare and prosperity of our nation, without fear or favour, and without deference to party allegiance. And before they cast that vote, I would make this plea to each and every member of Parliament: do not ignore the 63% who did not vote for Brexit. Do not ignore the businesses who have announced their intention to leave the United Kingdom. Do not ignore the investments that have already been pulled. Do not ignore the jobs that are at risk. Do not ignore the impact of staff shortages on the health service, the caring services, transport, and much of the public sector. Do not ignore the social and economic impact on the young, nor on those in our society who have the very least and yet may well suffer to the greatest extent. Do not ignore the risk of a hard border leading to violence reoccurring in Northern Ireland. And do not ignore the risk of a breakup of our United Kingdom. Let me close by reading to you a poem which I learned as a young boy. For the want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For the want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For the want of a horse, the rider was lost. For the want of a rider, the message was lost. For the want of a message, the battle was lost. For the want of a battle, the war was lost. For the want of a war, the kingdom was lost. And all for the want of a horseshoe nail. That is the classic illustration of how one small act can have unforeseen and far-reaching consequences. The decision that Parliament takes next week can undermine or revive the reputation of representative politics. And from that flows so much of our way of life. The night before he died, John Smith said this: "The opportunity to serve our country, that is all we ask." John was referring to the Labour Party, but his sentiment applies equally to all those who serve in our democracy. Every so often, in our long history, there has come a moment when Parliament has had to dig deep into its soul. Now is such a moment. Let us hope that the House of Commons has the will and the wisdom to exert its democratic right and secure the best possible outcome for the nation that it is so fortunate and so privileged to serve. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir John, I'm Catherine Smith. I'm chair of the John Smith Centre, and I'm also John's youngest daughter. It's my privilege to offer thanks tonight to Sir John Major for delivering the inaugural John Smith Lecture on Public Service. First, though, I want to offer our thanks to the Principal, Anton Muscatelli, not only for introducing the lecture tonight, but also for offering the John Smith Centre a home in this great institution, the alma mater of both my parents and, indeed, as he mentioned, myself and my sister Sarah. My mother is sadly not able to be here tonight. She's travelling in Thailand on a long-standing commitment, but I know she would want me to acknowledge how much it means to her that the centre is housed in the University of Glasgow. She regularly attends the House of Lords, and when asked to choose her title when she was first created a life peer, she chose to be known as Baroness Smith of Gilmore Hill, in recognition of the important role that the university has played in her life. I want to now offer my thanks, and those of my mother, to Sir John Major for delivering such a thoughtful and thought-provoking lecture. Maybe one day we'll get to find out what he thinks about Brexit. But seriously, there could simply have been no one better to deliver it. It is perfect that it was Sir John. The relationship between Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition is probably not always that good. But, as he has explained, the one between my father and Sir John was good, and much more. It was one that sums up everything the centre stands for, as do both men. Respect for politicians, including your adversaries and those whose views you don't share. Decency as a politician and in your dealings with others. Integrity and honesty. These are all words that easily trip off the tongue when thinking of either of these fine Johns. They don't come so easily when you listen to the discourse about the politicians of today. This does not mean we don't have any good politicians. The issue is deeper, more complicated, and, in our view, long overdue for serious research, discussion, and, critically, change. We believe that we need to act now to rescue the reputation of our elected representatives, and events like this form part of our work in seeking to do so. So this is your call to arms, ladies and gentlemen. Join us in our work. Spread the word and remind people of all the good that political representatives can do. And for some of you, regard today as the impetus that you needed to decide to step up yourself and serve. As I come to my closing remarks, I want to first offer my thanks to the team supporting Sir John, our team at the John Smith Centre, especially our interns led by Alison, Katie and Adam, and everyone at the university who's made today possible. And, of course, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. As Sir John says, it doesn't really work without you. I'll close with what the Centre has as its guiding inspiration. And they are the final words uttered in public by my father. Sir John has already referenced them, but they bear repetition because they so perfectly sum up a life devoted to public service. It was May 1994. He was the leader of the opposition and he was preparing for power. Speaking at a gala fundraising dinner in London, he closed his speech with these words: "The opportunity to serve our country, that is all we ask." Inspiring that sense of duty in future generations will be the Centre's legacy. Thank you.